Didn't allow me to really see where my groin was at.
They said it right to our faces. WNBA owners stood in front of cameras, puffed out their chests, and declared with absolute confidence, "This league doesn't need Caitlyn Clark." And maybe, just maybe, for a split second you believed them. After all, these are billionaire owners. They've got teams of analysts, spreadsheets, data. They must know something we don't, right? Wrong. Because what happened next didn't just prove them wrong, it exposed something they never wanted you to see. Something that has fans absolutely furious right now. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the WNBA might have just made the biggest mistake in the history of women's professional basketball. But first, let me set the stage. Because this story isn't about one player. It's about money. It's about ego. It's about powerful people making decisions behind closed doors. Decisions that don't add up. Let's rewind to 2024. The Indiana fever hit the road and something unprecedented happened. Arenas across the country couldn't handle it. Standard WNBA venues? Too small. Ticket demand? Off the charts. 9 times last season, opposing teams had to move their home games against Indiana into larger arenas. We're talking NBA-sized buildings. Venues that hadn't seen those kinds of crowds for women's basketball in years. Think about that. 9 road games. 9 times the regular arena wasn't big enough. The Fever weren't just a team anymore. They were an event. And the reason? You already know her name. Caitlyn Clark. Now here's where things get suspicious. The WNBA just released the 2026 schedule. And guess what? They're actually increasing the number of games moved to bigger arenas across the league. From 15 to 19. Sounds like growth, right? Sounds like momentum. But wait, let's zoom in on Indiana. Last year, 9 road games in larger venues. This year, 4. Just 4. The league is expanding to more big venues overall, but the one team that consistently sold out every arena they walked into just got cut by more than half. 9 down to 4. If that math makes sense to you, I need you to explain it to me. Because to everyone else watching, this looks like something else entirely. This looks intentional. This looks personal. This looks like the kind of decision that gets made in backroom conversations between owners who smile at each other while counting someone else's money. And when fans started noticing these numbers, when they started asking questions, the reaction was unlike anything the WNBA has ever experienced. But here's the thing, before we get to that explosion, you need to understand the excuse they tried to use first. Because the league thought they had the perfect cover story. An injury. A convenient, perfectly timed injury that would explain everything. Except, it didn't. And when fans dug deeper, what they found was even more damaging. Here's the cover story they wanted you to believe. Caitlyn Clark suffered a groin injury last season. It sidelined her. It was legitimate. And the league pointed to it like a shield. We can't commit to bigger arenas, they said. What if she gets injured again? We'd be stuck with empty seats. It's responsible planning. Sounds reasonable on the surface, doesn't it? But here's what they didn't expect. Fans started digging. They pulled the attendance records. They cross-referenced the dates. They looked at which games Clark actually played in and which ones she missed. And what they found, it blew the entire excuse apart. Let me give you the numbers. Because numbers don't lie. People do, but numbers don't. Indiana's road attendance last season averaged around 15,184 fans per game. That's not just good. That's historic. That number was roughly 4,000 more than any other team in the league. 4,000 extra bodies and seats, buying tickets, buying merchandise, buying concessions. Every single road game. Now here's where it gets interesting. Caitlyn Clark only played in 3 of those 9 moved games before her injury. 3. So what happened when she was out? Did the crowds disappear? Did attendance crater? Did those bigger arenas sit half empty? No. The games still drew. The seats still sold. The Fever still proved they were the biggest road magnet in women's basketball, with or without their star on the court. Read that again. The injury excuse doesn't hold up because the real-world test already happened. The league already saw what occurs when Clark's availability changes. And the crowds didn't vanish. So if the injury isn't the real reason, what is? This is where fans started connecting dots that the league desperately hoped would stay unconnected. Because when you look at which teams moved games last year versus this year, a pattern emerges. The Washington Mystics moved 1 game against Indiana last season into a bigger venue. This year? None. The Connecticut Sun? Same story. Moved 1 game last year. 0 this year. The Atlanta Dream? Moved a game in 2024. Nothing scheduled for the upcoming season. 3 teams. 3 decisions. All pointing in the same direction, away from giving Indiana more exposure. Meanwhile, teams like the New York Liberty, Minnesota Lynx, and Phoenix Mercury already play in NBA arenas. They don't need to move games because their buildings are already massive. So the reduction in fever big venue games isn't balanced out by anything. It's just less. Less opportunity for Indiana. Less revenue potential for the league's biggest draw. Less sense for anyone actually paying attention. Unless the decision wasn't about money at all. Unless it was about something far more personal. Something that traces back to conversations happening behind closed doors, between owners who publicly celebrate growth while privately making moves that contradict everything they claim to stand for. And when you understand who those owners are, when you see their connections, their rivalries, their motivations, that's when this whole situation starts looking like something straight out of a political thriller. Because these venue decisions don't appear out of nowhere. Let's talk about power. Not the kind you see on the court. Not the kind measured in points, assists, or championships. I'm talking about the other kind of power. The kind that operates in shadows. The kind that moves through phone calls between billionaires. The kind that shapes a league's future while fans are busy watching highlights. Because here's what most people don't realize about the WNBA. This isn't just a sports league. It's a business ecosystem controlled by a very small group of very wealthy individuals. And those individuals? They talk to each other. They vacation together. They sit on boards together. They make decisions together. And when one team starts making everyone else look bad, when one player starts generating more buzz, more revenue, more attention than the rest of the league combined, well, that creates tension. The kind of tension that doesn't show up in press releases. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're a WNBA owner. You've invested millions into your franchise. You've built a roster. You've marketed your stars. You've done everything right. And then Caitlyn Clark enters the league. Suddenly, your home games against Indiana are selling out in minutes. Your arena feels electric, but only when the Fever come to town. Your merchandise sales spike, but it's all Clark jerseys. At first you're thrilled. Revenue is revenue, right? But then you start talking to other owners. How much did you make when Indiana visited? Oh damn, that's a lot of money. Yeah, but it's not really our money, is it? It's her money. She's the draw. We're just the venue. That realization stings. Because these aren't people who like feeling like supporting characters in someone else's story. These are ego-driven, success-obsessed billionaires who bought teams to build something, not to play second fiddle to a rookie from Iowa. And that's when the whispers start. Maybe we don't need her. Maybe we can prove this league is bigger than one player. Maybe if we just reduce the spotlight a little. Now, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm not saying owners sat in a room and plotted against Caitlyn Clark. But I am saying this, decisions have fingerprints. And when you trace the fingerprints on this decision, the decision to cut Indiana's big venue road games from 9 to 4, you start seeing the same names over and over again. Owners who have been vocal about league parity. Owners who have publicly downplayed Clark's impact. Owners who suddenly found reasons not to move games into bigger arenas this season. Coincidence? Maybe. But fans aren't buying it. Because when the schedule dropped and people saw those numbers, 9 down to 4, social media didn't just react. It erupted. And the things fans started saying? The accusations they started making? The receipts they started pulling? The league was not prepared for what came next. The schedule dropped on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, it was chaos. Social media platforms lit up like wildfire. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, became a battlefield. Facebook groups exploded with essays from furious fans. YouTube comment sections turned into war zones. And the message was clear. Crystal clear. We see what you're doing. Fans didn't just notice the numbers. They analyzed them. They created spreadsheets. They made comparison charts. They tagged reporters, journalists, sports networks, anyone who would listen. One post went viral within hours. It simply said, the WNBA increased arena moves from 15 to 19. But Indiana went from 9 to 4. Explain this without mentioning Caitlyn Clark. I'll wait. Thousands of retweets. Tens of thousands of likes. And in the replies? Nothing but fire. They're sabotaging their own league. Imagine hating your biggest star this much. The owners are jealous. That's literally it. This is why women's sports can't have nice things. Comment after comment after comment, all pointing at the same uncomfortable truth. The WNBA appear to be actively limiting the exposure of its most marketable player. But the fan reaction wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something more organized. Because here's what the league didn't anticipate. Caitlyn Clark's fan base isn't casual. These aren't people who tune in occasionally and forget about the sport in the off-season. These are invested fans. They've followed her since Iowa. They've watched every college game. They've bought the jerseys, the posters, the memorabilia. They feel like they know her. And when you attack someone people feel connected to, you're not just making a business decision. You're making an enemy. Within 48 hours, hashtags started trending. Hashtag boycott WNBA. Hashtag protect Caitlyn. Hashtag owners exposed. Hashtag we stand with Clark. Some fans announced they wouldn't attend games. Others said they'd cancel streaming subscriptions. A few even started contacting sponsors, asking why companies would support a league that undermines its own star. The backlash wasn't just loud. It was organized. And that's when the media finally started paying attention. Sports journalists who normally ignored WNBA drama suddenly had questions. Podcasters dedicated entire episodes to the controversy. Even mainstream outlets picked up the story. WNBA faces backlash over fever scheduling decision. Fans accuse league of targeting Caitlyn Clark. Is the WNBA shooting itself in the foot? Headlines everywhere, all asking the same question. Why would a league actively work against its biggest draw? And while the league stayed silent, offering no official explanation, no press conference, no clarification, fans kept digging. Because they sensed there was more to this story. Something the owners didn't want anyone to find. Something hiding in plain sight. And when one fan stumbled across a particular set of financial documents, that's when everything changed. Here's where the story takes a turn nobody expected. While fans were busy flooding social media with outrage, one person decided to go deeper. Not just complaints, not just hashtags, actual research. This fan, let's call them a digital detective, started pulling financial reports, revenue breakdowns, attendance figures, gate receipts from the 2024 season. And what they found, it painted a picture so damning that even skeptics had to pause. Let me walk you through it. When the Indiana Fever played road games in standard WNBA arenas, those buildings typically held around 10,000 to 12,000 seats. Solid capacity, respectable numbers. But when games got moved to NBA-sized venues, we're talking 18,000 to 20,000 seats, nearly double the capacity. And here's the kicker, those games sold out. Not pretty good attendance. Not above average. Sold out. Every seat filled. Every ticket purchased. Every concession stand buzzing. Now let's do some quick math. A standard WNBA ticket averages somewhere between $50 and $150 depending on the seat. Let's be conservative and say $75 average. In a 10,000 seat arena, that's $750,000 in gate revenue. In a 20,000 seat arena, $1.5 million. Double the money. From one game. Multiply that by 9 moved games last season, and you're looking at millions in additional revenue generated specifically by Indiana Fever road games. Millions that went directly into opposing teams' pockets. The Fever created value everywhere they went. They were essentially a traveling ATM machine for the rest of the league. And this fan found something else buried in the data. Merchandise sales. At those bigger arena games, Clark jersey sales spiked by over 300%. Fans weren't just buying tickets, they were buying gear, programs, souvenirs, anything with her name on it. Concession revenue jumped too. More fans meant more food, more drinks, more everything. One game against Indiana in a big venue could generate more revenue than 3 regular home games combined. So the financial incentive to move games into larger arenas wasn't just clear. It was overwhelming. Which brings us back to the central mystery. If Indiana road games are literal gold mines, if every owner benefits when the Fever come to town in a big venue, if the numbers prove beyond any doubt that more capacity equals more money, why would teams choose to keep games in smaller arenas this season? Why would Washington say no to extra revenue? Why would Connecticut pass on a sold-out crowd? Why would Atlanta leave money on the table? Unless the money wasn't the priority anymore. Unless something else had become more important than profits. And that's when this fan posted a theory that sent shockwaves through the community. A theory so controversial, so explosive, that it made everything else look tame. A theory about what really motivates these owners. And it all centered around one word. One word. That's all it took to reframe this entire controversy. Jealousy. The theory was simple, almost too simple. But the more fans thought about it, the more it made horrifying sense. Here's how the fan laid it out. For years, decades, WNBA owners had been building something. They'd invested millions. They'd weathered empty arenas. They'd endured mockery from mainstream sports media. They'd watched their league struggle for legitimacy while the NBA printed money next door. These owners weren't just business people. They were believers. True believers who sacrificed because they genuinely loved women's basketball. And then Caitlyn Clark showed up. Overnight, everything changed. Suddenly, the league had mainstream attention. ESPN couldn't stop talking about the WNBA. Casual fans who'd never watched a single game were buying tickets. Ratings skyrocketed. Revenue exploded. But here's the problem. All that attention, all that money, all that growth, it was attached to one person. Not the league, not the teams, not the owners who'd spent years building this foundation. One player, one rookie, one 22-year-old from Iowa who walked in and became bigger than everything they'd built. Imagine how that feels. You're Sheila Johnson, owner of the Washington Mystics. You've poured your heart into this franchise. You've championed women's athletics for decades. And now every conversation about your team starts with, when is Indiana coming to town? Your own players, talented, dedicated, hardworking athletes, are suddenly afterthoughts. Background characters in the Caitlyn Clark show. The fans in your arena are wearing her jersey. It stings. Not because you're a bad person. Not because you don't want the league to succeed. But because human beings are human beings. And jealousy is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. The fans' theory suggested something uncomfortable. What if, consciously or unconsciously, owners started making decisions to protect their egos instead of their wallets? What if reducing Indiana's big venue games wasn't about injuries or logistics at all? What if it was about control? About proving a point? About saying, we matter too. Our teams matter. Our players matter. This league was something before her, and it'll be something after her. What if the scheduling decisions were a message, not to fans, not to media, but to each other? We don't need her. Now, some fans dismiss this theory immediately. Too emotional. Too dramatic. Billionaires don't make decisions based on feelings, they make decisions based on spreadsheets. But other fans pointed to evidence that made the jealousy theory uncomfortably plausible. Specific interviews. Specific quotes. Specific moments where certain owners and players seemed to go out of their way to diminish Clark's impact. And one moment in particular kept getting mentioned. A comment made during a private owners meeting. A comment that was never supposed to go public. But somehow, it leaked. And when fans heard what was said behind closed doors, the outrage reached a whole new level. The leak came from an unexpected source. Someone inside the room. Someone who heard the conversation firsthand. Someone who apparently couldn't stay silent anymore. The details emerged through a Sports Insider account. One of those anonymous profiles that occasionally drops bombshells the mainstream media won't touch. According to the leak, during a recent WNBA owners meeting, the discussion turned to the upcoming schedule. Arena capacities. Revenue projections. The usual business talk. And then someone brought up Indiana. Specifically, someone asked why more teams weren't requesting larger venues for fever games. The response? We've decided we need to show this league can thrive without relying on one player. It's about the long-term health of women's basketball. Sounds diplomatic, right? But the leaker claimed that's not where the conversation ended. Allegedly, and I want to emphasize that word, allegedly, one prominent owner said something far more revealing. Every time she steps on someone else's court, their team becomes invisible. Their sponsors start asking questions. Their players start feeling undervalued. We need to balance the scales. Balance the scales. Not maximize revenue. Not grow the audience. Not capitalize on unprecedented demand. Balance the scales. As if Caitlyn Clark's success was somehow unfair. As if her popularity was a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be seized. When this leak hit social media, fans lost their minds. They're literally admitting they're sabotaging her. This is the dumbest business decision in sports history. Balance the scales? She is the scale. These owners would rather feel important than be profitable. The comments kept coming. Thousands of them. An endless stream of disbelief and fury. But here's what made things even worse. The league didn't deny it. No statement. No clarification. No, this is completely false and taken out of context. Just silence. And in that silence, fans drew their own conclusions. If the leak was fake, wouldn't someone say so? If the quotes were fabricated, wouldn't owners be rushing to correct the record? The lack of response felt like confirmation. Meanwhile, former players started weighing in. Legends of women's basketball who'd fought for decades to build this league. And some of their comments were surprising. Not all of them defended Clark. In fact, some seemed to validate exactly what the owners allegedly said. The league was here before her, one former star posted. And it'll be here after. We don't need saviors. The divide was growing. On one side, fans who believed Clark was being deliberately undermined. On the other, people who felt her dominance was actually hurting the league's broader growth. Two completely opposite interpretations of the same situation. And caught in the middle of all this drama? Caitlyn Clark herself, who had been notably, almost eerily silent throughout the entire controversy. Until one interview changed everything. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point fingers. She didn't do any of the things fans expected, or maybe even wanted her to do. But what Caitlyn Clark said in that interview, it cut deeper than any angry rant ever could. The interviewer asked a simple question. Have you seen the backlash about the schedule? The reduced arena moves for your road games. Clark paused, just for a moment. And then she smiled, not a happy smile, more like the kind of smile you give when you've accepted something painful. I just want to play basketball, she said. I don't control schedules. I don't control arenas. I control what happens between the lines. That's my job. The interviewer pressed harder. But do you feel like you're being treated fairly by the league? Another pause. Longer this time. I think everyone has their own definition of fair. That's all she said. No accusations. No complaints. No drama. And somehow that made it worse. Because fans watching that interview saw something in her eyes. Something that felt like exhaustion. Like someone who's been fighting battles she never asked for. Here's a 22-year-old woman who just wanted to play the sport she loves. And instead of being celebrated, instead of being supported, she's navigating politics and egos and boardroom drama that has nothing to do with basketball. The interview clip went viral within hours. But it wasn't her words that fans kept replaying. It was that pause. That moment of hesitation before she answered the fairness question. Because in that pause, people saw the truth she wouldn't say out loud. She knows something isn't right. She feels the resistance. But she's choosing to stay above it. To not engage. To keep her head down and let her game speak for itself. And fans? They were done staying silent on her behalf. The interview sparked a second wave of outrage, bigger than the first. She's too classy to say it, so we'll say it. They're trying to break her spirit and she won't let them. This woman is handling more pressure than any athlete I've ever seen. Protect Caitlyn Clark at all costs. Support flooded in from unexpected places. NBA players started commenting. Celebrities posted their opinions. Even mainstream news outlets that rarely cover sports started asking questions. Is the WNBA mishandling its biggest star? The narrative was shifting. What started as a scheduling controversy was becoming something much bigger. A referendum on the entire league. On its leadership. On its priorities. On its vision for the future. And right when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, a WNBA owner finally broke their silence. But what she said didn't calm the storm. It poured gasoline directly onto the fire. The owner who spoke up was someone nobody expected. Not one of the usual suspects. Not someone known for controversy or hot takes. It was the owner of a mid-market team. Someone who typically stayed in the background. Someone who rarely made headlines. But when she finally talked, every word landed like a bomb. The interview was supposed to be routine. A local sports segment about the upcoming season. Expectations. Roster changes. Standard fluff. Then the reporter asked about Caitlyn Clark. And something shifted. The owner's expression changed. Her posture stiffened. And instead of giving the usual diplomatic non-answer, she went somewhere unexpected. Look, she started. I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble with my colleagues. But someone needs to say it. The reporter leaned in. The camera stayed fixed on her face. This league has a once-in-a-generation opportunity sitting right in front of us. Maybe once in a lifetime. And we're squandering it because some people in positions of power have their priorities backward. Silence in the studio. I've sat in those meetings. I've heard the conversations. And I'll tell you, there are owners who would rather feel important than watch this league reach its full potential. She wasn't done. When Indiana comes to town, my arena fills up. My sponsors are happy. My players feed off that energy. That's good for me. That's good for everyone. So why would we limit those opportunities? The reporter asked the obvious follow-up. Are you saying other owners are intentionally limiting Indiana's road game exposure? The owner paused. I'm saying, decisions are being made that don't make business sense. And when decisions don't make business sense, there's usually another reason behind them. Then she delivered the line that would dominate sports media for the next week. Some of my fellow owners need to decide what they want more, their egos or a thriving league. Because right now, they're choosing wrong. Boom. Social media exploded. Again. But this time, it wasn't just fans making accusations. It was an owner, from inside the system, confirming what everyone suspected. The scheduling decisions weren't about injuries. They weren't about logistics. They were about ego. Within hours, other owners started responding. Some defended themselves. Others attacked the outspoken owner. A few stayed conspicuously silent. The WNBA tried to release a vague statement about respecting different perspectives and focusing on growth. Nobody bought it, because the cat was out of the bag. An insider had just exposed the dysfunction at the highest levels of women's professional basketball. And fans? They weren't just angry anymore. They were activated. Boycott movements gained momentum. Sponsor pressure intensified. Season ticket holders started questioning their renewals. But through all this chaos, one question remained unanswered. A question that would determine the future of the entire league. What happens next? And the answer might already be in motion. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. The WNBA is standing at a crossroads. And the path they choose in the next few months will determine whether women's basketball becomes a permanent fixture in American sports culture or fades back into obscurity. This isn't hyperbole. This is reality. Because right now, the league has something it's never had before. Mainstream attention. Genuine momentum. A player who transcends the sport and captures audiences who never cared about women's basketball. That doesn't happen often. That doesn't happen by accident. And that definitely doesn't last forever. Windows of opportunity close. Public attention shifts. The next shiny thing comes along, and suddenly yesterday's phenomenon becomes tomorrow's afterthought. The WNBA has maybe a 2 or 3 year window to capitalize on what Caitlyn Clark has created. To build infrastructure. To lock in sponsors. To convert casual viewers into lifelong fans. To prove that women's basketball deserves a permanent seat at the table. And what are they doing instead? Fighting about arena sizes. Protecting egos. Making decisions that prioritize personal feelings over collective growth. It's maddening. It's heartbreaking. And fans see it clearly, even if the owners don't. But here's where this story takes its final turn. Because something is shifting. The backlash isn't going away. If anything, it's intensifying. Pressure is mounting from every direction. Fans, media, sponsors, even other owners who recognize the insanity of the current approach. And behind the scenes, conversations are happening. Conversations about leadership changes at the league level. Conversations about restructuring how scheduling decisions get made. Conversations about taking power away from owners who've proven they can't be trusted to put the league first. Nothing confirmed yet. Nothing official. But the whispers are getting louder. Change might actually be coming. Not because the owners suddenly developed self-awareness, but because the financial pressure is becoming impossible to ignore. Sponsors don't invest in dysfunction. Networks don't pay top dollar for controversy. And fans, as we've seen, have no problem walking away when they feel disrespected. The math is simple. Fix the problem or watch the golden opportunity slip away forever. And Caitlyn Clark? She's still doing what she's always done. Showing up. Working hard. Playing the game she loves at the highest possible level. She doesn't need validation from owners. She doesn't need their approval or their politics. Her game speaks for itself. But she does deserve better. She deserves a league that recognizes what she brings. That maximizes her impact. That builds with her instead of secretly working against her. And the fans? You deserve better too. You deserve a league that respects your passion. That values your loyalty. That makes decisions based on growth, not jealousy. So here's my question for you. After everything you've just heard, the numbers, the leaks, the owner drama, the fan reactions, do you still believe the WNBA is making the right choices? Or do you think this is just the beginning of something much bigger? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about it. Because this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. If this video opened your eyes, smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And share this with anyone who cares about the future of women's basketball. The owners might not be listening, but we are. And together, we might just be loud enough to force them to change. See you in the next one. But wait, you thought the story ended there? Not even close. Because while fans were celebrating that one brave owner speaking out, while the media was dissecting every word of her interview, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something that changes everything we just discussed. Let me explain. Remember how I mentioned sponsors were starting to pay attention? How pressure was mounting from the business side of things? Well, that pressure just became very, very real. 3 days after the owner's explosive interview, reports started surfacing about emergency meetings. Not regular board calls. Not routine check-ins. Emergency meetings. The kind where lawyers are present. The kind where PR teams are on standby. The kind that only happen when something serious is about to go down. And the topic of these meetings? Caitlyn Clark's contract situation. See, here's what most casual fans don't realize. Clark's current rookie contract is, by WNBA standards, modest. We're talking about a player generating hundreds of millions in value for the league, making a fraction of what she's worth. That's how rookie contracts work. Standard stuff. But what's not standard is what's happening behind the scenes right now. Multiple sources are suggesting that major sponsors, the ones who write the really big checks, have started making demands. Not requests. Demands. If you want our money, Caitlyn Clark needs to be featured prominently. In big arenas. In primetime slots. In marquee matchups. These sponsors don't care about owner egos. They don't care about balancing the scales. They care about eyeballs, engagement, return on investment. And the data is crystal clear. Clark equals ratings. Clark equals attendance. Clark equals merchandise sales. No Clark? No check. It's that simple. Now imagine you're a WNBA owner who just spent the last month trying to limit Indiana's exposure. You've been quietly working to prove the league doesn't need one player. And suddenly the people who fund your entire operation say, actually you do need her. And if you don't start acting like it, we're taking our money elsewhere. That's not a threat. That's a reality check. According to the leaked information, at least 2 major sponsors have already begun reassessing their WNBA partnerships. Not canceling yet, but asking hard questions. Questions like, why would we invest in a league that actively undermines its biggest star? Questions like, what's the long-term plan here? Questions like, should we be looking at other opportunities? When sponsors start asking those questions, leagues panic. Because without sponsor money, there is no league. Teams fold. Salaries shrink. The whole ecosystem collapses. The owners who thought they were sending a message about parity and independence, they might have just triggered a financial crisis. And the emergency meetings? They're about damage control. How do we walk this back? How do we reassure sponsors without admitting we were wrong? How do we save face while completely reversing course? Those are the conversations happening right now. In boardrooms. On private calls. In hushed exchanges between people who never expected their decisions to blow up this spectacularly. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. While owners scramble to contain the damage, someone else has entered the conversation. Someone with more power than any individual owner. Someone who could reshape the entire future of women's basketball with a single decision. And their involvement? It's about to turn this controversy into something unprecedented.